All right, guys, welcome to the show. It is another beautiful Tuesday here in Rockland, California. We're going live straight from my office, and as you guys know, we go live every Tuesday at 5:30 p.m. Thank you guys for tuning in weekly and kind of keeping up with us on the show. Um, I got a very interesting topic today. We're going to talk about the cost of selling a home here in Sacramento. And I know that there's a few myths out there of what it costs and discounts and commissions and fees and all these other things. We're going to cover that today. So you guys just hold tight. But really, where this kind of conversation came from was last week or earlier. Yeah, earlier last week. I did a reel or a short video, and I talked about the power of home appreciation. So, as we talked about before, there is a forecast going out that on average, out of about 4 or 5 different economists and companies that are forecasting for 2022 as far as home prices, the average is about 5.5%. And here it is. Just wanted to show you guys. So you're looking at about a 5.5% average for all the forecasts. And I gave an example of a $550,000 home that if we purchased it at the beginning of the year, and based on the forecast, if we actually hit those numbers, which I believe that we will, puts us at about $580,000. So as you can see, there's about a $30,000 increase. And a lot of the people, started responding to me, hey, you're not taking into consideration all the fees and commissions, all this and that. I said, yes. I'm talking about price increase. I'm not talking about selling the home within a year, because there's a whole different scenario with that. And I could go through that as well. But I'm talking about for the typical home buyer, homeowner, that they can expect some home appreciation. Now, I don't have a crystal ball as where exactly we'll go. But if you guys have been paying attention to the Sacramento market, that's a national forecast. I think for Sacramento in particular, because we have so much demand here and so much influx here, and we're really developing as a city right now, that I personally think we will see higher numbers than those. Specifically for the last 2 years, a lot of my clients that have bought a home a year, 2 years ago, they've seen 10, 20% increases on their home values. So much more than that forecast. So I think it is realistic. But once again, I'm not entirely sure, nor am I personally projecting where I think the market will go. I just don't do that. I just show the stats, I show the data, and I let you make a decision for yourself. Well, let's hop into it. Here's what you guys are here for. You're talking about the cost of selling your home in this market. So I got to throw this up and show you guys exactly what we're talking about, right? All right. Well, this really came up, like I said, when a lot of people were asking about, hey, what are the things that go into selling a home? Well, first and foremost, I want to talk about preparing the home and getting an offer, and then the actual cost of selling it. So before we go on the market, we typically, my company and me, I love to walk with a client through their property. I want to know exactly what makes that property stand out, what makes that property different than the one that sold down the street, or if it's a one of a kind, what really makes that property shine and how we can maximize that to the full potential. So we really use a strong and different marketing strategy than most agents that have been around that are just doing, postcards, open house, yada, yada, yada. We do a lot of online marketing. As I'm talking to you even now, of course, YouTube and video ads are a huge part of our business now. So we really like to take that into consideration and market with the most up-to-date strategies that are available today. So that's something we really focus on and we really thrive on, honestly. And that's how we are getting top dollar for a lot of properties. Of course, even doing things like virtual tours and home walkthroughs to sell your home without ever even having someone walk through the property. But more than that, it's preparing the home for sale. A lot of people really miss out on this because a lot of agents might just take the listing, get some nice photos going, and throw it on the market. What I really want to do is walk through it with a client and say, hey, where can we fix this property up? Where can we put a little bit of money that's going to go a long way as far as getting an increased value for the property and for the neighborhood, and really sell it for top dollar with a minimal amount invested? And so really that's kind of what separates us, I think, because I want to go through, first of all, and update the property, do some things that'll make it go a long way, give you some really good return on your investment. But even more than that, I want to fix some of the items that a buyer is going to call out on their home or pest inspection and try to work your price down once you're actually in contract. So really, that's the important part, but we'll touch on that here in a little bit. Okay. And of course, getting into contract. Now you've been on the market. We got you a phenomenal price for your home. But what's actually going to happen with the negotiations? Most people don't really consider this because if they're getting 5, 10 offers, whatever, it's in a crazy market, they're just going to go for the highest and best. But sometimes they don't take into consideration that that highest and best is giving them a high offer now, but planning on working it down once the home and pest inspections come in, or if we have an appraisal issue, which is basically saying that the bank's evaluator or an appraiser is coming out and saying that the value of the home is lower than what the buyer is willing to pay for it. So you have what's called appraisal gap. And in that, it's very important to see if your buyer is actually going to be willing to cover that difference in cash or what they're willing to do to negotiate, because getting this price, it doesn't mean that's where you're going to land at the end of the day. I hope this is making sense for some of you guys. I see some comments coming in, so I'm just going to peek those really quick. Thank you guys for tuning in, by the way. And I also even have my good friend Andy Neal from Florida hopping on. I know he's I believe in England right now, if I'm not mistaken. He's a broker out there in Florida. So if you guys are ever looking for some properties, give him a shout out. He's amazing. So hopping back into it, the cost, you want to make sure that that buyer is qualified and able to even finance for that home. A lot of the times people are just throwing out, right? It's a very quick pace market. And it's really easy as a home buyer to get caught up in the pace and the fastness of the market. And if a home comes up, they're just got to throw the offer. We got to just get in there. We got to get our foot in the door. But with that, a lot of sellers are getting upset and honestly just kind of getting undercut sometimes because you have this emotional response from a buyer that's willing to pay this price. But then a few days into it, they're like, oh, I don't know if this house is really worth this much. I don't know if I really want to pay this much for this house. So that's kind of a huge issue that we're running into right now. You're starting to see, I'm always watching the market, starting to see a lot of homes second time or third time going to contract. And that's typically a lot of what happens. But more than that, it really comes down to the home and pest inspection. I'm just going to go into this, is that a lot of the times people are really not taking into consideration that once that buyer comes in, gets into contract with you, they have about anywhere from up towards 17 days. Typically in this market, you see buyers do their home inspections within 5 to 10 days, and they'll get a professional pest or home inspector out there or both. And with that, a lot of the times they're going to call out all the dry rot. They're going to poke all around your house, on the eaves, around the roof, and things like that. And a lot of times the board or the paint will cover it and the wood on the home will seem fine. But once it's poked through, it's determined dry rot. And of course, those inspectors put on a pretty nice, hefty invoice in order to do those repairs. So they're trying to act as behalf of the contractor and give you a bid for some of those repairs. And on nice homes, I've easily seen those bills go up into the thousands of dollars, sometimes even the tens of thousands of dollars, especially if you live in a rural area where there's a lot of decking on the exterior. If they're including that decking in their report, it can get very expensive. So all this to say is I really want to get you guys in a position where you've prepared your home to go on the market. You've avoided all these pitfalls to where a buyer can negotiate you down on the price. Because the price that we get in contract at, I want to be closing next to that price and make sure that you are getting all the money that you can out of that property. Another just quick tip for you guys while you're watching this is that it would be really wise, especially to get a roof inspection. So you could get a free roof inspection. There's a few companies that I work with. They'll come up, climb on your roof. You don't even need to be there. But the cool thing about some of these roof inspectors is they'll give you a 2-year roof certificate. If they give you a 2-year roof certificate, they're basically saying, hey, this home is good at least for the next 2 years on this roof. If something happens to it, we're going to cover it. Almost kind of like an insurance policy, or if the roof leaks, they're going to come out and do that. So to get that certification for the actual certificate, it might be a few $100. But if the home is older and you kind of want to avoid this negotiation pattern, it's a few $100s that goes a long way, and it brings a lot of confidence to the buyer that is purchasing your home. Another thing, especially on older homes, if they have HVAC units or AC units that are 10, 15, 20, 25 years old, especially in that 15 to 25 year range or older, I would highly recommend, instead of just replacing your HVAC and spending a ton of money, another good option is just to get a professional tech out there, spend a little bit of money, have them update all the Freon, maybe change some coils in there and just kind of tune up the HVAC. They'll also give you an invoice saying that it's been tuned up. That way, when you go on the market, you have that certificate as well. And it also kind of cuts off the negotiations with the buyer potentially trying to get a huge bid on a new HVAC unit, which can be $10,000, $15,000, and trying to deduct your price. So those are just some hacks as a seller in this market. All right, guys. Now, I want to really jump into the meat and potatoes. What can you expect to sell a house for, and what can you really walk away with? So I reached out to my title company and I wanted to bring up a net sheet. So a real life net sheet on a home kind of in this market. You'll see here at the top, I've boxed it. So this is a home at $550,000. Okay. So a home that's kind of standard price here in Sac County right now, $550,000. So as you can see, that's just what you're potentially getting. You could see that first arrow says escrow or settlement, and that's about $1,550. And then the owner's title policy, that's about $1,709. So those two fees can typically be paid by the seller, aka you, if you're selling the property. But typically in this market, you'll see those fees split 50% between the buyer and 50% between the seller. Okay, so just keep that in mind. As a seller, you're not obligated to pay the full 100% of both of these fees, which is roughly around $3,200 right there. So that could be about 50%, okay? I just put those all on the seller today in the net sheet just to kind of give you an example of some of the things that will be negotiated, okay? Jumping down, there's a transfer tax. So typically with cities and counties, there's some sort of transfer tax for moving the property over to a new buyer. So keep that in mind. That can also be split, but typically it's on the seller for that one. And that can vary depending on the house price and what the city or county that it's in. All right, jumping down. So this is probably going to be your biggest expense with selling a property. This is when you hire me and are ready to make all the money in the world. This is the listing agent fee and the selling agent fee. So selling agent is basically another name for a buyer's agent. And those are both at 2.5%. Now, just so you know, those 2.5% to each side, they are not, determined. They are a market standard, about 2.5% to each side. But you should always know that you always have negotiation room in this market. So these are just examples. Again, every property and every sale is different, but these are just some good numbers to kind of show you what's going on. If you could go to the bottom, all the way, that last arrow, it shows you that the total closing costs is about $31,500. And that puts your estimated net over there to the bottom right at $518,462. So from selling a property at $550, after all the costs, all the back and forth, you're looking at a net of $518,000. Okay. So that's just a really quick rough and dry example. And what I was talking about before about sellers expecting a certain price, they're expecting a certain net that they think they're going to get with the buyer they're about to get in contract with. But really the huge trigger point is when those inspections roll around. And really that's when it counts of who you hired as your agent, because that's really the negotiation platform at that point. It's no longer price, but now it's really about the buyer trying to either get a price reduction from you, a credit from you, or a repair from you. And the way that credit works, let's say there's $5,000 worth of work to be done to the property. They could either say, Mr. Seller or Miss Seller, would you please do the repairs of $5,000? You can say yes or no. You can say a partial amount of that. But the other portion that a lot of buyers will take, instead of that $5,000 and actually having the repairs done right away, they'll ask you for what's called a closing cost credit. So what you can do through escrow is, out of your net proceeds, you can actually credit $5,000 to the buyer and it'll go towards their closing costs. So it'll help them out and you never have to touch the property. There's less liability when you just give a credit. You say, hey, I'm giving you this credit. I'm not doing any repairs to the property. It's less liability. It's a lot quicker. It's a lot easier. The buyers are happier because they don't need to bring in as much cash to purchase the home. So that's a really good way of doing it. And of course, you can negotiate on how much credit you're willing to give them if you decide to go that route. So again, guys, these are just some tips and tricks on how to sell your property in this market. These are the constant things that I'm seeing over and over and again on every transaction. Just so you know, just be expectant for those kind of negotiations and don't be too upset when you start seeing those. If you guys ever have any considerations about selling your property or are looking to transfer into a new property here in the Sacramento area, I'd be happy to talk with you about that. You can always reach out to me and my team down below. There's a quick link on there that'll give you a 15-minute consultation with me. And of course, I'd be happy to meet with you at the property and show you exactly what we can sell it for in today's market and what we can do to increase the value of it as of now. So guys, thanks so much for tuning into this live. I really appreciate you hopping on every week. It's such a pleasure. So we go live every week on Tuesdays at 5:30 p.m. If you guys ever have any questions, feel free to comment or spam the chat. And again, subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out in the algorithm. If you're enjoying this, give it a like and a thumbs up. Appreciate you guys. We'll see you next week. Once again, my name is Sam Golovey.